Have you ever stopped to think how different the world might be if three guys hadn't decided to build computers in a small garage in California? Imagine life without your smartphone, without sleek laptops, or without technology that makes your life easier every single day. It sounds crazy, but all these innovations can be traced back to one legendary company, Apple. The journey Apple took to become a trillion-dollar giant wasn't always smooth sailing. It was filled with twists, betrayals, near-collapse moments, and genius innovations that nobody saw coming. But how exactly did a tiny garage startup become one of the most influential tech companies in the world? It all started in 1976 in a garage in Los Altos, California. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne got together with nothing more than passion, a bit of cash, and a wild idea. They wanted to create computers not just for engineers or businesses, but for everyday people. Can you believe they built their first computer, the Apple I, with nothing but a few parts and some bold ambitions? It was nothing like the computers today. It didn't even have a keyboard or a monitor, just a circuit board. But still, they managed to sell it. Oddly enough, the initial price was $666.66. Not because they loved sinister symbolism, but simply because Steve Wozniak loved repeating digits. It didn't take long before Ronald Wayne, the third founder, got cold feet and sold his 10% stake for just $800. Think about that for a second. Today, his share would be worth billions. Would you have made the same decision if you were in Wayne's shoes? Meanwhile, Jobs and Wozniak didn't slow down. They soon introduced the Apple II, a groundbreaking machine that actually looked and felt like a computer we'd recognize today. It had a keyboard, a colorful display, and could even run spreadsheets, something entirely new at that time. Suddenly, Apple was more than just another tech startup. It was a company transforming how people lived and worked. Apple's popularity exploded, and by 1980, the company was ready to go public. When Apple's IPO hit the market, it created more than 300 millionaires overnight, including Jobs and Wozniak. But quick success can be dangerous. Have you ever wondered how difficult it is to stay at the top once you've reached it? As Apple expanded, tensions began rising internally. Steve Jobs was a visionary, but also famously difficult to work with. Passionate, perfectionistic, and sometimes explosive. To balance out Jobs' unpredictability, Apple hired John Sculley, a successful executive from Pepsi, to lead as CEO. Ironically, Jobs himself recruited Sculley by famously asking him, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or come with me and change the world?" At first, their partnership seemed perfect. Apple released the Macintosh in 1984 with a legendary commercial shown during the Super Bowl. Directed by Ridley Scott, it depicted a woman shattering a screen controlled by a totalitarian ruler, boldly announcing that Apple was here to break rules and change the future. But despite its groundbreaking innovations, Macintosh sales were disappointing. The product was pricey and not powerful enough for demanding tasks. Internal conflicts at Apple intensified, especially between Jobs and Sculley. The disagreements became unbearable, and ultimately, Apple's board sided with Sculley. In 1985, Steve Jobs, the heart and soul of the company, was forced out of Apple. Can you imagine losing everything you built at the age of 30? What would you do if your dreams collapsed overnight? Jobs faced that exact scenario. Apple, now without its charismatic leader, entered its most uncertain phase. Products released after Jobs left lacked innovation, charisma, and failed to excite the public. The once powerful company began to slowly fade from the spotlight. Rivals like Microsoft took advantage, rapidly dominating the computer industry, pushing Apple into the shadows. But the story wasn't over. Far from it. Would Apple survive without Jobs? And could Jobs make a comeback after being kicked out of the company he founded? The answer to these questions would eventually shock the entire tech industry. After being removed from Apple, Steve Jobs faced a choice. He could have easily vanished from the tech industry, living off his wealth quietly. But would someone as driven as Jobs really just fade away? Of course not. Instead, Jobs immediately began crafting his redemption story. He founded a new computer company, Next, aimed at creating powerful machines for education and businesses. Though Next computers were beautiful, sleek, and innovative, they were expensive and struggled to gain wide popularity. Still, Jobs remained confident. His vision was ahead of its time, and he refused to compromise quality. Meanwhile, in a seemingly unrelated move, Jobs made another bold investment. He bought a small computer graphics division from filmmaker George Lucas, renaming it Pixar. At first glance, this seemed random. What did Jobs know about animation or film production? Yet Pixar soon revealed Jobs' uncanny instinct for groundbreaking opportunities. Pixar's first movie, Toy Story, became a global sensation, making Jobs a billionaire overnight. While Jobs was busy proving himself outside Apple, the company he once founded was spiraling downward. Apple's products lacked excitement. The company's image suffered, sales dwindled, and the media openly speculated about Apple's collapse. Could Apple survive the decade? Or would it become just another failed tech giant, a cautionary tale in business schools? Apple's board was desperate, and in a twist nobody saw coming, they turned back to Steve Jobs. In 1996, Apple acquired Next, effectively rehiring Jobs as an advisor. Initially cautious, Apple's leadership soon realized Jobs wasn't just an advisor. He was their only hope. Jobs quickly took control as interim CEO, ruthlessly simplifying Apple's product lines and restructuring the company's philosophy. Apple needed clarity, Jobs believed. Instead of dozens of mediocre products, Apple would offer just a few extraordinary ones. This strategy immediately paid off. In 1998, Jobs unveiled the iMac, a sleek, colorful, all-in-one desktop computer. Unlike anything the market had seen, the iMac wasn't just a computer. It was a fashion statement, a symbol of creativity and individuality. Consumers fell in love instantly. Apple was officially back. But Jobs wasn't done yet. He knew computing alone wasn't Apple's future. It needed something bigger, something personal. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a tiny portable device capable of holding thousands of songs. Critics initially doubted it. Who needs thousands of songs in their pocket? But soon, everyone wanted one. Apple wasn't just selling technology, it was reshaping culture. Then, in 2007, Jobs unveiled the iPhone, perhaps Apple's most defining invention. Jobs promised the iPhone would change everything. Skeptics laughed, but within months, the entire world understood. The iPhone quickly became an essential part of daily life, changing communication, social media, and even how businesses operated. The success of the iPhone propelled Apple to new heights. Soon after, Apple launched the App Store, enabling anyone to create apps and transform industries overnight. Uber, Instagram, and countless other billion-dollar businesses wouldn't exist without Apple's ecosystem. As Apple's success skyrocketed, Jobs' health began deteriorating. Diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Jobs quietly battled illness behind the scenes. Yet he refused to step down, determined to push Apple even further. Despite declining health, Jobs continued delivering groundbreaking products, including the iPad in 2010, another innovation that critics initially mocked as just a big iPhone, but which later revolutionized tablets, education, and media consumption. In August 2011, weakened by illness, Jobs finally resigned as Apple's CEO. Less than 2 months later, on October 5th, he passed away, leaving behind an unmatched legacy. News of Jobs' death sent shockwaves worldwide. Tributes poured in, reflecting on Jobs' relentless passion, visionary leadership, and profound impact on technology. What had started in a tiny garage decades earlier became a trillion-dollar empire that forever changed society. Apple continued thriving under Tim Cook, who became CEO after Jobs. Products like the Apple Watch, AirPods, and revolutionary advancements in computing and artificial intelligence continued shaping the tech landscape. But none of this would have been possible without Steve Jobs' stubborn pursuit of perfection. Ultimately, Apple's story is more than just corporate success. It's a powerful tale about risk-taking, innovation, betrayal, redemption, and passion. It's about how one person's dream can indeed change the world, even if that dream begins in a humble garage. Can you imagine how different the world would be today if Steve Jobs had given up? If Apple had never existed or had disappeared into obscurity? Thankfully, Jobs persisted, and now every time you hold an iPhone, open a MacBook, or stream music effortlessly from the cloud, you're living inside his incredible dream.